Well, Germany and Ghana have a lot of differences, but ethnicity and local traditions, as well as the role they play in politics, is common to both countries. Well, here in Ghana, campaigns for election 2020 have already begun. But in Germany, political leaders are holding their breath ahead of key elections this weekend. The far right is expected to win big at the expense of mainstream parties like Angela Merkel's Conservatives. Again in Ghana, we can talk about strongholds, Ashanti region for the governing NPP, the Volta region for the opposition NDC, etc. Well, in Germany, the vote in two eastern states is seen as a litmus test for the political situation at the national level. Let's learn a bit more as political correspondent William Glucroft joins us for the weekly crossover with our partners DW in Berlin. William, it's good to come your way once again. Now, do tell us, give us a preview of what to expect from the Germany elections on Sunday.
Yeah, good afternoon back to you. It's good to be here as always. Yes, going into the state elections this weekend, the far-right AfD, Alternative for Germany party, is doing very well in the polls, expected to come at or near the top, possibly first place, especially in one of the two state elections. These states are currently run by the parties that are in the national government. Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats and her junior partner, the Social Democrats. They run the states of Brandenburg, which surrounds Berlin, and just south of it, Saxony. So this is coming as this is creating quite a stir among mainstream politics as the AfD continues its upward motion, its upward trajectory in polls, gaining more and more power at the state level, currently in parliaments all around Germany, and now might have even more of a share of power after the elections on Sunday.
Well, again, here in Ghana, where we were looking more at a third force because people seem tired with the two dominant parties. But why are these state elections so much gaining so much attention at the national and international level?
Well, state elections in Germany are often seen as a reflection or a test of where things are on the road to national elections. You have state elections that happen over time, over the period of years between national elections, and how parties perform at the state level could be an indication of how they might perform at the national level. And Germany's national government, the CDU and SPD, Angela Merkel's party and her Social Democrat partners, they have been losing, going down and down and down in polls in state elections and the European election earlier this year, time and again, whereas smaller and single-issue parties like the AfD on the far right and on the left side, the Greens, with their hard-hitting issue of climate change, they've been benefiting from the collapse of mainstream party popularity. So this is why it's so important these state elections might reflect into the future going into national elections, which may take place in 2021.
We'll see how that goes. But then essentially, when you say the far right, it denotes extreme nationalism and things like that. What explains the popularity of the far right in this election and even indeed in the previous elections in Germany?
Well, the AfD appeals to voters who feel like they've lost something in their local culture, their local language, feels like they've lost something to larger forces at the national level of Germany or the European level of the EU. And just as local traditions and local customs play a role in Ghana politics, so too do they play a role here in Germany. We have to remember that Germany today used to be two different countries, and before that, areas, regions were their own kingdoms, they were their own states, they had their own way of doing things. And while of course you ask an everyday voter what they're voting for or why they're voting, of course they won't say because of 1,000 years of history, but that 1,000 years of history doesn't just go away. And the feeling of losing out economically, losing out to traditions, to cultures, is something that the AfD really hits hard on, especially in the East, where there is a widespread feeling that they are still coming up short in comparison to their Western counterparts, which is still seen in the East as running the show in Germany. So that nostalgia, that feeling for power, that feeling for loss of identity and loss of status, that's something that the AfD profits very strongly from.
Interesting. Here in Ghana, when we have our own discussions about elections, we try as much as possible to minimize tribalism or ethnicity, whatever you might call it. But I'm curious to find out what kinds of conversations dominate the discussions around the election in Germany. What do Germans generally say?
It's a very good question. Germany has been through a very trying year. Exactly, or almost exactly a year ago, we saw far-right mob violence in the eastern city of Chemnitz. That's in the state of Saxony, where one of these state elections is taking place. A guilty verdict came down just a few days ago for the Syrian refugee who was accused of stabbing someone to death that started these riots. And in this past year, Germany has really had to ask itself the question if far-right violence and far-right tendencies, racist, xenophobic trends, if they're just a fad or if they really are more deeply rooted in German society than many people want to admit, and if the state institutions, the domestic intelligence and law enforcement have really been doing enough to follow and track and prosecute far-right crimes and far-right trends. This has been a very, very trying time for the German politics and German society, and that's what is the background going into these state elections, where migration, open borders, security, feeling comfortable in one's own home, in one's own place, are indeed playing a role.
All right, well, politics is always getting dynamic. The dynamics of politics always amuse all of us everywhere in the world. Thank you very much, William, for shedding light on that for us to learn how it works over there. I'm sure that you've also learned how it works around here. William Glucroft is political correspondent with our partners, TW, joining us in our usual crossover all the way from Berlin. This is Still the Pulse with me, Gifty, and up here.